Another SEC safety has jumped in the transfer portal. Could that be a target for LSU? We're talking about it. Let's go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. We will get to some transfer portal rankings, according to Pete Nakos and our friends from On3, the impact transfer. So I kind of want to use that as a springboard to talk about who I think is going to have the biggest impact for LSU in the 2025 football season. But the player I'm about to talk about actually dovetails into the Diego Pavia ruling. If you haven't heard that, the Vanderbilt quarterback and all junior college players have effectively been granted more eligibility. I'll explain it coming up and why it matters, but quite honestly, I think the biggest impact is going to be felt for LSU baseball moving forward. I'll explain what I mean, and we'll get there on today's episode. But as we start here, if you're listening on podcast, you won't see this, but if you're on YouTube, you notice the thumbnail was a player with an Indiana uniform on, and that's Lewis Moore, who actually spent this past season playing for Ole Miss. But before Ole Miss, he played 2 seasons at Indiana, and prior to that, played 2 seasons in junior college. Now, he's a safety that entered the transfer portal on Christmas Day, or it was reported on Christmas Day that he entered the transfer portal. Now, I want to be very, very, very transparent. There are no reports anywhere yet that LSU is targeting, has reached out to, is interested in Lewis Moore. So I want to be very upfront with that, so there's no misgivings anywhere. What we do know definitively is Brian Kelly has said, and if you've been here with us every day, and thank you to all the everydayers, I've played the soundbite for you several times where Brian Kelly says very plainly that they're going to end up with 15 players in this portal cycle. They're at 13 right now, and they still want help on the offensive line and at safety. And it is my contention that LSU currently has silent commitments from an offensive lineman and a safety on a team currently playing in the college football playoff. And those players can't formally enter the portal or won't formally enter the portal until their season ends, whenever that may be. Now, I have not confirmed that. So I want to be clear, that's an opinion. I believe it's an educated opinion based on conversations I've had with people around LSU's collective and the program, that I do believe LSU is targeting and has silent commits from an offensive lineman and a safety. It's my opinion, okay? I don't have a name that I can share with you, but I've had enough deep-level conversations that I believe they do. And we live in an era right now where what does a commitment actually mean, especially for a player that's not in the portal? Let me give you 2 examples, and then I'll tell you about why Lewis Moore might be interesting. CJ Daniels. A lot of you asked about CJ Daniels. What happened there? Well, I had a conversation with someone very familiar with LSU's roster and NIL efforts, say it that way, and was told, remember, CJ Daniels was, fantastic for LSU this year. Among receivers, he was third among receivers in receptions and in receiving yards. Brian Kelly said on the Monday press conference after the Vanderbilt game, so going into the Oklahoma game, the final game of the regular season, that it lauded CJ Daniels, leader, does everything they wanted, played through injury, and they expected him to be back next year. 8 days later, CJ Daniels is in the portal. Well, what happened? Apparently, Auburn came forward and via representatives, however that happens, made an NIL offer for CJ Daniels that was so good that LSU, as I was told, didn't even have an opportunity to counter. It was just he was leaving. So Daniels formally puts his name in the portal with the intention of going to Auburn. And at that time, clearly was contacted by other schools. Ole Miss got in the mix, and he landed at Miami. So effectively, he became a very highly sought after player, got a better offer, more attractive offer from Miami, and landed there. The point in telling you the story is nothing is done until it is. Brian Kelly was telling you on a Monday, CJ Daniels was coming back. 8 days later, Daniels is in the portal with the intent of going to Auburn. And then he's visiting Ole Miss and lands in Miami. So this is fluid and can change. It's why I wanted to preface that. I also shared a story with you of a player, an SEC offensive lineman, whose representatives reached out to LSU very aggressively about this player in particular. And it seemed as though this deal was going to get done to bring this SEC player to LSU. And ultimately, the player elected not to go into the portal and stayed at his current school. So again, nothing is done until it is. So all that to say, while LSU, I believe, does have a silent commitment from an offensive lineman and a safety on teams currently playing in the college football playoff, I just shared a story with you where there was a player from an SEC school who looked like he was headed to LSU and stayed put. CJ Daniels went into the portal thinking he was going to Auburn and ends up at Miami. So again, very fluid, and I think this can change, which is why if you're LSU and you know you need safety help, and we've gone over this, you look at the lowest rated defensive starters this season for LSU, it was Major Burns and Jordan Gilbert. Your safety play was very poor. And Sage Ryan, who was actually your highest graded safety, is now at Ole Miss. And I don't think anybody is going to look at the job Sage Ryan did this year and look at him in the way you looked at Grant Delpit or LaRon Landry or Jamal Adams or any of the great All-American safeties, Eric Reed, that LSU's had in the past. It's not to knock Sage Ryan. I think he was a very solid player for LSU, and I don't need to go down that road again, but my contention is for 3 years he played out of position and was injured. This year, in 2024, was the first time in his career he played his natural position, had his best year. But I still don't think Sage Ryan is an all-conference safety or anything to that extent, but you're thin in numbers there now. Major Burns is graduated. Sage Ryan is at Ole Miss. Kylan Jackson entered the transfer portal. So you've got Jordan Gilbert coming back, who really struggled in 2024. You've got Deshaun Spears, who you're very excited about his ability to grow and develop and be a really good player for you. But you have to go address safety. So every time a player enters the portal, until LSU addresses safety, every time a player at that position enters the portal, that's a viable option. We're going to talk about it here because I believe LSU has to consider all of these options at safety. So Lewis Moore enters the transfer portal. And Moore is a guy that when you look at his bio, he is well-traveled. So he actually went to junior college coming out of high school in the COVID year and played 2 seasons at Navarro College at receiver. And then in 2020, and then in 2021. In 21, he added time at safety. So they moved him to defense. Well, after 2 seasons in junior college, he goes to Indiana in the Big Ten and spends 2 seasons at Indiana. And over those 2 seasons, he plays in 24 games with 10 starts during his 2 seasons with the Hoosiers and had 83 tackles, 3 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, played all 12 games, starting 10 games. So this was 2023. So a season ago. Starts 10 games, plays in all 12, 83 tackles, 3 picks, 3 forced fumbles, was fantastic, right? For Indiana. Goes into the transfer portal, is highly sought after. Remember, a year ago, Lane Kiffin kind of earned the Portal King moniker, and they were going after everybody. So Lewis Moore is one of the players that they brought in out of the transfer portal after his 2 seasons at Indiana. So remember, 2 years in JUCO, 2 years at Indiana, then this year, this past season at Ole Miss. And at Ole Miss, he ended up playing in 10 games for Ole Miss, but just wasn't quite as productive as he was during his 2 seasons, and certainly the 2023 season at Indiana. In the season at Ole Miss, he played in 10 games, had 33 tackles, 2 tackles for a loss, a half a sack, didn't force a turnover. But again, a guy that you look at it now has played 5 years of college football, 2 in JUCO, 2 in the Big Ten, and then last year at Ole Miss in the SEC. So is that a viable option? Now, pretty clearly, Ole Miss was looking for a better option at safety, which is why they went and got Sage Ryan from LSU. So if LSU were to go after Lewis Moore, you'd effectively be swapping Sage Ryan for Lewis Moore. And I don't know that that's something that's going to interest LSU. But it's also fair to say, would Lewis Moore, who has an 83 tackle season in the Big Ten, who's played 5 years now of college football, going to a 6th season, would he be a better option, or at least a quality veteran piece to add to your safety room on top of what you have right now? Yes. Sand's a better option. Yes, he would be. And we've already gone through the fact that LSU has targeted some big names in the portal at safety. Dylan Thieneman was the number 1 safety from Purdue. He went to Oregon. Zechariah Poyser, the number 2 safety from Jacksonville State. He's going to Miami. Devontae Smith from Alabama is headed to Notre Dame. On the previous show, we talked about Jalen Stroman from Virginia Tech, who's still uncommitted. We talked about Jalen Catalon, a guy who started his career at Arkansas, played 2 seasons ago at Texas, and now this past year at UNLV, he's back in the portal. Could he be an option, a guy with a ton of experience? Again, I think all options have to be considered because you have to add a veteran presence there. And maybe it's one of the guys I mentioned. Maybe it's a silent commit that they already have, or maybe it's Lewis Moore. But everything has to be considered right now. So file Moore away as one that we need to talk about and follow here in the coming days to see if LSU does throw their hat in the ring. All dependent on, I think, and contingent on what happens with what I believe is a silent commit of a team still playing in the college football playoff. The tricky part there is, look, on New Year's Eve, you got 2 teams playing in the college football playoff. On New Year's Day, you've got 6 teams playing in the college football playoff. So by the time head hits pillow on New Year's Day, 4 more teams' seasons are going to end. Could the players we're discussing, player or players, be on one of those teams? I don't know. I don't know. But it's also fair to mention, if you're LSU and Brian Kelly's been adamant, you're going to add an offensive lineman, you're going to add a safety. What if those situations, for whatever reason, fall through? You have to have a backup plan, because what's not an option is coming out of this portal cycle or going into 2025 without adding a veteran presence at safety. You'd love for it to be now. We'll follow each available safety in the portal as we move throughout this portal cycle. Okay, it is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I mentioned that Lewis Moore spent 2 years in JUCO. If you haven't followed the Diego Pavia ruling, the Vanderbilt quarterback, I want to explain, I'll do it very simply, what's happened there and how it could impact guys like Lewis Moore, but maybe more importantly, the LSU baseball roster. I'll explain what I mean next. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. If you love to bet on props, you can bet on which player will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score. So many ways to get in on the action there at FanDuel. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your chance at $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So we spent a good bit of time there talking about Lewis Moore, who started his career, played 2 years at JUCO, 2 years at Indiana, and then this past year at Ole Miss is in the portal again. Now, he still has another year of eligibility because his career started during the COVID year, and he has a super senior season available to him in 2025. But remember, the Diego Pavia situation is one that's going to affect a lot of different players throughout college football. Diego Pavia, of course, is the quarterback who spent this year at Vanderbilt. But before he moved into the Power 5 rankings in the FBS rankings, was a junior college football player before he went to New Mexico State and then most recently this year at Vanderbilt. Well, Diego Pavia sued, effectively saying that his years in junior college shouldn't count as eligibility for the FBS. Of course, junior college is not regulated by the NCAA. It's a completely different system altogether. So his point is, why should my years in junior college affect my eligibility in an NCAA-sanctioned sport? And a judge agreed with him, or at least granted him an injunction to say that the NCAA can't hold him out, that he can play while this whole situation goes on. Well, the NCAA effectively said, you know what? We lose in court all the time. Let's just grant a blanket waiver so we don't have 500 players suing us the same way Diego Pavia is. We'll grant a blanket waiver while we work this out. So any JUCO player can gain that eligibility or regain those years of eligibility. So if you played a year at JUCO and you're out of eligibility, you have another year now based on this blanket waiver. No need to appeal, no need to sue. Every player that played in JUCO now has that additional eligibility. So for a guy like Lewis Moore, he, all of a sudden, after playing those 2 seasons at JUCO, goes to Indiana in 2022, plays 22, 23, and then 24 at Ole Miss, now has another year of eligibility because of this injunction, this blanket waiver that's been granted by the NCAA. So there are literally hundreds, if not thousands of players, and I don't have the number in front of me. I mean, I have to comb every roster in college football to know how many players with that had JUCO passed that are currently playing, major college football, to know who that would impact. But one of the things worth mentioning certainly is how this might impact baseball, because there's probably no sport, certainly no major sport in college athletics that's impacted more by the JUCO ranks than baseball. It's very common for players out of high school to go play junior college and then make their way to a major college program, a Division I college baseball program. I mean, you know the very long list of players. I mean, even recently, a guy like Paul Gervais, was a junior college guy who came to LSU during Jay Johnson's first season, was fantastic for LSU out of the bullpen. And when you look at this current LSU baseball team this year, that's going to be for the 2025 season, when you look at the JUCO players, Tanner Reeves is an infielder who's a redshirt junior who's comes to LSU from Blinn Community College, so he played in the JUCO ranks. Well, Tanner Reeves now, effectively the years he spent in JUCO are wiped away, and he can effectively begin now his college career at LSU. So, this is a guy who, won a JUCO national championship at Blinn in 2024. You hit 398. I mean, this is a major transfer that could help you on the infield that effectively is starting his career over now because of this waiver. That's one example. Blaze Priester is a great example. Blaze Priester is a guy from Live Oak who it was always thought was just going to jump straight from high school into the professional ranks. Didn't get his number. He ends up going to Meridian Community College. He's now a redshirt junior as well, having played in the junior college ranks, who now, for all intents and purposes, can begin his baseball career at LSU. So while Priester has spent a couple of seasons in the junior college ranks, you're talking about a guy who played, he was on the LSU roster in 2022, but then played 23 and 24 at Meridian Community College. Effectively, that's now like he played one season of college baseball and has now a total reset. Effectively, you can go play 3 more years of college baseball with LSU if he wanted to. Now, certainly that's a guy who has professional ambitions, but Connor Ware, who's a left-handed pitcher from Pearl River, who is a junior, who effectively is now playing his first, think of it this way, 3 years in the JUCO is now effectively a freshman in college baseball. So all of these guys now have effectively been granted a start over of their career. So now someone like Connor Ware or Blaze Priester or Tanner Reeves could end up playing 3-4 years at LSU starting now. Of course, they're draft eligible and at any point could go into the draft. But what if you end up being a really good player at LSU and NIL revenue share, which is about to go into effect, becomes more lucrative and more appealing than riding a bus and playing in the minor leagues where you can continue to improve? That's a possibility. So there's a long way to go to see what happens. That waiver is a blanket waiver for 1 year. But if that policy becomes permanent by the NCAA, this could dramatically impact how rosters are built. I mean, think if you go spend 2 years in the junior college level and then come to LSU as a 20-year-old, and you're effectively starting your career as a 20-year-old freshman who's played 2 years of junior college baseball, now you can play your age 20, 21, 22, 23-year seasons, and there could be a red shirt in there as well. I mean, you could be 24 years old still playing college baseball. That certainly could impact how you recruit the high school ranks, and it could make junior college a more appealing path to say, let me go to JUCO for a year or two, improve, and then I become a more appealing, attractive target for a major college baseball program, which could even be more lucrative because of NIL and revenue share. So I know we all kind of look at the Diego Pavia ruling, and that's a high-profile one because he sort of splashed on the scene this year and he plays quarterback in the SEC. And quite honestly, who knows if Pavia is going to go back to Vanderbilt? I mean, he may be coming back to college football with the intent of going into the portal and being a $2 million quarterback for a contender. He could be. I don't know that Diego Pavia is going to go back to Vanderbilt this year. He's probably going to go to the highest bidder and make as much money as he can because he can't get that money and won't get that money in the NFL. But the tentacles stretch much further, and certainly into baseball as well. So we're going to keep an eye on that and how that impacts things. And certainly if that waiver becomes a permanent fixture in college athletics. But I mean, just think of Zach Mettenberger. Back in 2013, Zach Mettenberger left Georgia, went to junior college, then came to LSU. He effectively would have had another season. What if Mettenberger had come back in 2014 and you don't end up with the Anthony Jennings, Brandon Harris freshman season in 2014? And you have another year of Mettenberger, who is a 3,000-yard passer in 2013. You get Mettenberger back in 2014. That type of situation could happen now, and it would be appealing because of NIL and revenue share. So don't look at the Diego Pavia thing as a random one-off for the Vanderbilt quarterback. That is a much, much wider reaching and potentially dramatically influential ruling for college athletics, and not just football. Okay, it is Locked on LSU. Most of our conversation, obviously, over the past several weeks has been about the transfer portal and the work LSU's done there. We'll quantify it and qualify it a bit for you with some portal impact rankings as we continue to wrap up Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. You want to be in that number when LSU less than a week away. When LSU takes on Baylor in the Texas Bowl, the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase, it's Game Time. You can filter only incredible deals on great seats with Game Time picks. You can see the view from your seat on your phone before you buy. There's the all-in pricing feature. You got to turn that feature on, but when you toggle it, it'll show the price up front, so there's no surprises when you get to checkout. You can buy tickets in seconds with 2 taps. It's all at Game Time. And Game Time Pick shows you only the best value on tickets. It's Game Time. You want to be there for sports or comedy or music or theater. Game Time gets you there. Take all the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. As we wrap up today's episode of Locked on LSU, I wanted to run through this because one of the guys who's, of course, at the forefront of all the portal news is Pete Nakos from On3, who's done a great job. I mean, the guy barely sleeps. It's you could just tell it's portal season, and this is where he's going to thrive. Well, Pete Nakos over at On3 recently put out, actually did this on Christmas Day, the transfer portal winners so far. What programs have done the most? Now, keep in mind, the portal is not closed. The portal closes on the 28th, but every team has 5 days after their bowl game for more players to enter the portal. And we all do anticipate that you'll see more players enter the portal all the way up to January 25th. Remember, the College Football Playoff National Championship game will be on January the 20th. 5 days after that, January 25th, is when the final players will have the opportunity to enter the portal in this cycle. Remember, you don't have to sign with your team in that window. You just have to enter your name into the portal in that window to have the opportunity to go somewhere else. Well, Pete Nakos has Texas Tech as the number one team in this portal cycle so far. And look, the Matador Club at Texas Tech came together. They've been very aggressive for the way that they've fundraised and addressed the portal. And clearly it's worked for Coach Joey McGuire so far. But number two on the list is LSU. So it's one thing for us to say it, for us to sit here as LSU fans or media or alums or whoever to look at this portal class that LSU's got and say, it's incredible, the impact guys. When you have someone whose job literally is to cover the portal, and Pete Nakos, has LSU as the second best portal class so far, it's very telling. And he talked about missing out on Bryce Underwood and Brian Kelly and Austin Thomas ramping up their efforts in the portal based on what happened there on signing day, which is something we've talked about a good bit. But what's really interesting beyond that is look who's next. So it's Texas Tech, then LSU's two. Ole Miss, Auburn, Texas A&M, 3, 4, 5. So 2 through 5 are 4 teams in the former SEC West, but it goes to show you that there's a commitment from teams in the SEC to try to win now through the portal. And, Lane Kiffin a year ago kind of paved this way. And for what it's worth, Oregon he has as 6. Those are the top 6 that he has right now. But the big difference that I'll continue to illustrate is the numbers. Ole Miss continues to add numbers through the portal. I mean, Deuce Alexander, Kawan Lacey, Sage Ryan, Jaden Yates, Dazon Stribling, Delano Townshend, Antonio Kite, PJ Wilkins, Caleb Odom, Jalen Braxton, Luke Haas from Arkansas, Patrick Kutas from Arkansas, Prince Will Uman-Mielen from Nebraska, Princely Uman-Mielen's brother, Andrew Jones, and then Deshaun Womack. That's 15 right there already for Ole Miss. LSU has 13. So Ole Miss already has 2 more signees than LSU, but LSU he still rates as higher, a better quality. But you better believe Ole Miss isn't done as well. And then Auburn's another one with double-digit portal commitments as well. So there's 2 points of this. Number one is it's validation that what LSU is doing right now isn't just this LSU purple and gold echo chamber where fans and media and Twitter are all saying, man, this is great. LSU's doing awesome in the portal. The guy who literally pays his mortgage covering the transfer portal is telling you it's the second best portal class so far. Okay, that's number one. Number two is it's going to be interesting as we continue to see the sample size grow in years in the portal era and the 12-team playoff era of how teams continue to construct their roster. And my contention has been pretty consistently, while Brian Kelly has said, recruit and develop in the high school ranks and supplement over the top with the portal in positions of need. Lane Kiffin, for example, has built his team through the portal. Last year, they added 30 players in the portal. LSU added 9 a season ago. This year, LSU is already at 13. Brian Kelly's told you they're going to get to 15, but Kiffin could push that number closer to 30 again, because if you add 30 guys via the portal and then you have players enter the portal, graduation, NFL, like you're going to have that massive turnover year after year. Well, the only way to address it is kind of like what Brian Kelly had to do year one at LSU, which was go into the portal and get quality starting caliber players. The risk with that is what happens if you miss. Not just don't sign guys, but what happens if the guys you sign aren't great? Like LSU defensively 2 seasons ago in 2023 with all those secondary players. You did great in 2022. You know, Greg Brooks and Joe Fouché and Jarek Bernard-Converse and Mekhi Garner, all those guys were great. And then but then they were all gone. And then in year 2 under Brian Kelly, you whiffed on Denver Harris and Deuce Chestnut and all those guys. So there's a risk there if you're constantly turning over that many players, because what happens if you miss? We'll see. I think Brian Kelly's trying to find the balancing of the scales to find that sweet spot where you're not necessarily turning over half your roster every single season and adding 30 guys in the portal, but maybe it's not 9, maybe it's that 12 to 15 range of impact guys, which is going to be the sweet spot. But again, continue to balance the scales, and we'll see where they land. Okay, that'll do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. Shout out to all the everydayers who are here with us. Really appreciate everyone who's helped us grow this podcast since I sat back in this chair starting in June. Launched this podcast back in 2018, stepped away after about 3 years or so. And Caroline Fenton had it for a couple of years, and appreciate so much the work Caroline did. And the folks over at Locked On, offered me the opportunity to come back in June, and it's been awesome ever since. I'm very grateful to everybody. So if you're on podcast and just finding us, thank you so much. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, rate us, leave a review if you're on YouTube. Please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video, and let a friend know if they love the Tigers. We got you every single day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.